Hi everyone, I'm Sherrie Palm, the founder of the Association for Pelvic Organ Prolapse Support, coming to you this morning in this webinar to share some basic insights about pelvic organ prolapse. We felt as part of POP Awareness Month, which is June, that there would be value in building a webinar video that's POP basics to help women out that are newly diagnosed with prolapse, women that suspect they have prolapse because they've Googled their symptoms, even for women who've been in this path for a while, but truly don't even know what the basics of pelvic organ prolapse are. So that being said, let's get this party started. When women are diagnosed with POP, they typically have one of two reactions. They're either deer in the headlights or they're really ticked off. I was really ticked off. I could not believe I was being diagnosed with something I never heard of when I found out how common pelvic organ prolapse is. The question that we get in our closed Facebook patient support forum all day, every day, is why wasn't I informed of or screened for pelvic organ prolapse sooner? We hear it all the time, whether women are in their mid-teens or they're in their 80s. Regardless of what country women come from, they all want to know the same thing. Women make up half the world. There are just a little under 4 billion women on this planet. And more importantly, women birth the world by and large. And certainly there are some women who don't give birth, but the majority of us do. And all women deserve earlier pelvic organ prolapse information, options, treatment to help them better understand what the big picture is and how to optimize their health. There are 5 types of prolapse. There are 4 grades of severity, and there are diverse combinations of types of prolapse. It's not like women are going to have just one type of prolapse. Typically, we see women have 2 to 3 types of POP. And because each of our lifestyles, our behaviors, our coexisting medical conditions are different from woman to woman, how we're impacted by POP is going to be somewhat unique from woman to woman. So we need to be mindful of the fact that just because someone else says that these are the symptoms that she's having, it does not mean that we are going to have those same symptoms. Thus, the need to educate yourself about the whole big picture. So what I did is I put together these groups of slides of the 5 different types of POP alongside a picture of the female anatomy. And what's missing from this picture is the full anatomy picture here is there's actually a sac of intestines that sits above the pelvic cavity. That is a type of POP, and that's not in this picture, but you can see here, and they're all marked out so you can look at this slide more closely after the webinar is over. The bladder, the pubic bone in the front, then there's the bladder, then there's the uterus somewhat above and behind the bladder. That's an ovary that's above the uterus there. The vaginal canal sits right below the bladder. The rectum is somewhat parallel with the vagina, and behind it all, right underneath that butt cheek, is your spinal column. So if you look at the picture on the left-hand side here, you can see this cystocele, which is bladder prolapse, and the bladder does not elongate as prolapse gets more pronounced. This is just indicating that it's traveling down the body. It's not staying up here where it is in this picture over on the right-hand side here. It's actually traveling down. And what it's doing is pushing into that front vaginal wall. And when that bladder starts to push outside of the body, what you're actually seeing is the vaginal wall. The bladder's right behind it. You're not seeing the bladder itself, you're seeing that vaginal wall. With a rectal seal, and that's on the back side here, you're going to notice how on the right-hand side here that rectum is somewhat, it's not flat straight, but it's somewhat a straight line. And on the left side, where they're showing the rectal seal, there's a bulge at the bottom. That is your rectal seal, which is actually literally a hernia pushing that wall of the rectum out. The poop gets caught in that bulge and causes chronic constipation. The poop can't get out of the body. It just stays stuck there in that little pocket. And women, I swear to God that they would trade their firstborn male child sometimes because they're so frustrated with not being able to poop when they have the urge to poop and they can't do anything about it. No matter how much they eat fiber or walk or drink water or whatever, that poop is stuck in that hernia pocket. With uterine prolapse, the uterus, which is in the center of the picture on the right-hand side there, it literally moves down that vaginal canal. And whereas with a cystocele and a rectocele, you're actually seeing those types of prolapse which are tucked behind that vaginal wall, and you're seeing the vaginal wall. What you see with uterine prolapse is the uterus. You can see the hole in the center of the cervix where the baby comes out of, and that whole uterus can, if the POP keeps advancing without being addressed, the whole uterus can come outside the body, which is called procedentia. And obviously, because it's traveling all the way down that pathway of the vaginal canal, the symptoms that you're going to have throughout that journey are going to change from time to time. An enterocele is your intestines, and there's a sac that actually sits above the organs in the pelvic cavity on that picture on the right-hand side there. And they're encased in a membrane, and tear is going to occur in that membrane, and then those intestines drop down into that pelvic cavity and intermingle with the organs that are there. So they can drop down between that uterus, which is in the center of that right picture, and the rectum on the back side, the right side of the picture, or they can come up over the top of that ovary and slip down in front of the uterus. Or if a woman has a hysterectomy, she's even more likely to have an enterocele, and it can drop down into the big hole that's left right in the middle of all those organs when that uterus has been removed. Vaginal valve prolapse occurs when a woman has been given a hysterectomy and the top edges of that vaginal canal are not attached to anything. Then that vaginal canal will cave in on itself, comes down, and what you're going to see coming out the bottom of the vagina is two little flaps of tissue. Childbirth and menopause are the leading causes of pelvic organ prolapse. But it's important to know that there are multiple lifestyle behaviors and coexisting conditions that also compound those risk factors for you. So you may have a baby and you may have prolapse immediately after you have that baby, and then it may get better and then it may come back. You may not notice any prolapse symptoms at all until you're in your 50s or your 60s. Some women have prolapse issues early on. For some, it takes decades for them to appear. Or they're there and you just don't realize that they're symptoms of pelvic organ prolapse because no one has talked to you or informed you of that condition. So on this slide, you can see that childbirth is cause number 1. Right below that, menopause is cause number 2. But also some of the additional causal factors. And this isn't a complete list. This is just the most common causes of POP. The woman at the top of the middle section of pictures there has got Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. That's double jointed, really stretchy skin. And you may be double jointed in one joint, you may be double jointed in your entire body. There are 13 types of EDS, so it's extremely variable. And it's extremely common for women with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome to have pelvic organ prolapse. In the picture right in the center of this slide is a woman that's got chronic coughing, and that repetitive jerking down of all of the organs in that pelvic cavity aggravate prolapse and make it worse. The bottommost picture in the center batch of pictures is a woman jogging, and it's important to know that while there are certainly a lot of people that are huge into jogging and running, marathon running as well, and they feel it's great for cardio fitness, it's a great way to keep your muscles strong and stay healthy. What is not recognized at this point is how detrimental hard foot strike fitness activities are to the organs in the pelvic floor and the pelvic floor structure itself. It's really of value to consider if you're a runner or a jogger, and people that do that love the endorphin rush, to look for a different type of fitness activity. I'm a fitness geek. I exercise 5 days a week, but I don't run, I speed walk. In the upper right column on the right-hand side there, that woman holding the baby, heavy lifting is a causal factor for pelvic organ prolapse, and we typically think about job-related heavy lifting, or we think about the Olympian women that lift the really heavy weights. But what do women do all day, every day? They pick up their children, and that's heavy lifting as well. We don't recognize that we need to contract that pelvic floor before we pick up heavy weights. And with big kids, we really should be sitting on the couch and encouraging them to come to us and sit on our laps to avoid having that pressure on that pelvic floor. And then on the bottom of the right-hand side of the slide here, you will see a woman has chronic constipation because she has pelvic organ prolapse, and she's sitting on the toilet and she's bearing down, she's pushing down to get that poop to come out. Chronic constipation is both a cause of POP and a symptom of POP. It's a loop. There are many symptoms of pelvic organ prolapse. These are the most common ones that you'll experience. Starting from the top and going toward the right there, fecal incontinence can occur with pelvic organ prolapse. It's not the most common symptom by any means, but it is certainly a symptom that occurs relatively frequently among women. And the flip of that is the chronic constipation. You may have both. Painful intercourse is an issue, and here's a little visual for you. Imagine that you have got a grade 2, let's just say grade 3 cystocele bladder prolapse, and you can't get the pee to come out because in the early stages of prolapse you leak, and in the more progressed stages of prolapse the urethra gets crimped and you can't get the pee to empty out. So let's say you've got a grade 3 cystocele, you've got a grade 2 rectal seal, which is your rectum, and you've got chronic constipation. So you've got that bulge of stool poking in the back wall of your vagina. And you've got uterine prolapse too. Let's call that a grade 2 as well. So your uterus has started to move down into the vaginal canal. Now imagine, if you will, a penis doing this. Can cause some discomfort for sure for women. Pain or pressure in the vagina, and pain is very variable from woman to woman, but pressure in the vagina is extremely common with pelvic organ prolapse. You've got your organs pushing down there, it just makes sense. You can have back or pelvic pain, and back pain is actually quite common with an enteral seal. Urinary incontinence is a very, very common symptom of POP. It may be stress urinary incontinence, where when you cough or you sneeze, the pee leaks out, even when you laugh. It may be urge urinary incontinence, where you just, as soon as your hand hits that doorknob, you feel that urge, you gotta go, you gotta go, you gotta go. It could be mixed incontinence with both of those. It could be coital incontinence, where you're experiencing incontinence during acts of intimacy. It can be any mixture of those types of incontinence. It could even be a fitness incontinence that happens when you're doing your fitness activities. Urine retention, again, the flip of incontinence, the urinary incontinence, where you can't get the pee to come out. You have got to pee. Lord knows you want to pee, but you're not peeing. And that occurs in your higher stages of severity, your grades 3 and 4. And I actually experienced that. What I had was 3 types of prolapse, cysto, rectal, and enteral seals. And for me, and I was grade 3, I would wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning to have to go to the bathroom, and I would, sleepwalk to the toilet, drop trowel, sit down, and the pee wouldn't come out. And then I would rub my abdomen, thinking that might work, and that didn't help. And I would turn on the faucet to get the water to come out, and thinking that the water sounds would help. That didn't make any difference. Then I would close my eyes and visualize a man peeing off a waterfall. That didn't help. And I'd go back to rubbing my abdomen, and eventually I could urinate. This whole process would take like 20 minutes every night. Well, then I learned that urethra gets crimped because the organs are displaced in that pelvic cavity, and I understood why that was happening. With vaginal tissue bulge, and this is the most common symptom of POP, the tissues are literally coming out the bottom end of your vagina. That's literally what's going to happen. And you can take a handheld mirror at the end of the day, stand in your bathroom, lock the bathroom door so you've got your privacy, and take a look to see while standing if there's any tissues bulging on the outside. And if they are, you have got some type or grade of severity of pelvic organ prolapse. Lack of sexual sensation because of all the organs pushing down there, and they may be pressing on nerves in the area. It can reduce your sexual sensation or eliminate it completely. And for women who have been fully orgasmic prior to having prolapse, this can be very, very frustrating. And lastly, tampons can push out. You can have used tampons your whole adult life, and all of a sudden they won't stay in, and you don't know why. Well, it's because the prolapse is pushing them out. Some common symptoms of pelvic organ prolapse are listed on this slide, and I tried to group them up with the types of prolapse. So on your rectal seal on the right side of the slide here, you can see the chronic constipation, and bloating occurs too because that stool is backed up in that colon. It's got no place to escape to, and then the gases build up in there. So there's a lot of intersect between the chronic constipation and the bloating. The upper left-hand side with an enterocele, lower backache is common because those intestines have dropped down into that lower back area and they've moved into that pelvic cavity and is putting pressure on different structures in there. With the cystocele, the stress urinary incontinence, the urge urinary incontinence, it can dance back and forth between different types of incontinence. That is common. And common POP ramifications that don't get anywhere near enough press time are the sexual outcomes of these types of symptoms, how they impact your intimate life. Let's dig a little bit deeper into that. So intimacy symptoms, it can be any of these, it can be all of these, depending on what type of prolapse you have and your grade of severity. The tissues that bulge out of the vagina are very stigmatizing for women. They are very impactful to self-esteem, and that often prevents women from moving forward with intimacy. They're so worried about their partners seeing those tissues bulging out of the vagina that they just shut down from sex altogether. Urinary or fecal incontinence, either one can be a mood breaker, and if the urinary incontinence is a little bit of incontinence, it might not even be noticed. If it's a lot of urinary incontinence, it'll be noticed. If it's fecal incontinence, both partners are noticing it for sure. Vaginal gap is something that gets a bit of press time in our patient support forum, and women hate the gap. They hate the way it looks. They hate the way it feels, and that is that open vaginal space. When before you gave birth, you had a tight vaginal space, and now it's open and you can actually see organs inside. Women don't like that. Urine retention can be frustrating if your bladder is full of urine, and as I mentioned before, you've got a penis poking into it. Not the most fun to have. Lack of intimate sensation is very frustrating. Women enjoy sex, just like men do, and we want to be sexually satisfied, so that's frustrating. And pain with intimacy occurs more often than it is acknowledged. Women are often not believed when they tell their partners that they have pain with intimacy, and it's important that we educate men as well as women about these impacts to quality of life. So what do women want? Well, they want to feel better. All women really want is just to feel normal again. That's it in a nutshell. So there are both non-surgical and surgical treatments available for women with pelvic organ prolapse. And I did not a complete list of both sides of the equation here, but these are pretty full lists on each side. So on the non-surgical side, we're looking at physical therapy, and the PTs are amazing with prolapse. The things that they can do, the variety of treatments they can provide, even just how they educate women about their bodies and how it relates to prolapse is priceless. Pessaries are devices that you insert vaginally, which provide support to those pelvic organs, and there's over 20 different types of pessaries. They come in all different types of sizes. There's a lot of innovation going on right now in the pessary space. They're designing new types of pessaries, and that's going to continue to explode, I believe. Kegel exercises are a lost art. They used to be talked about a lot in the late 50s by Dr. Kegel, the one who invented them, who recognized that this is a valuable tool for women. And the problem with Kegel exercises is you need to be consistent with doing them. You need to know how to do them correctly, pull in and up, not pushing down and out. And women don't always know that. Hormone therapy is valuable for women that are in the menopausal stage of their life. It shores up those vaginal tissues, which creates a little more support for your pelvic organs. Vaginal rejuvenation heat treatments are valuable, and they can be radiofrequency or they can be laser based. They both serve a good purpose, and I experimented with radiofrequency and I was blown away at how everything in my pelvic cavity, I felt like I was 25 years old again. It was fabulous. Unfortunately, it didn't last very long for me, and so it needs to be typically rebooted every 6 to 12 months, and for me it only lasted 3, so I was disillusioned by that, but I think they're very valuable for a lot of reasons. Support garments are of value, and they actually help provide some support to everything in that pelvic cavity. You have to put them on the proper way so that your organs are tucked up inside before you pull them up, and I think they serve a very, very valuable tool, especially to women that have got Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and that's that tissue integrity health condition that makes all your tissues in your body weak. So that the support garments serve a good purpose. Pardon the background noise, my dog is drinking water. There's E-stimulation, and that's providing like a shock to that pelvic floor muscle to make it contract and be stronger. And there's also Emsella chair, which is a giant magnet in this chair, which strongly contracts all your pelvic floor muscles. Or there's biofeedback, which the PTs often use, or biofeedback practitioners use to help women recognize and understand what different sensations mean within that pelvic muscle, that pelvic floor muscle, to help you just understand what you're doing. And there's also bulking agents. So each of these different non-surgical treatments address symptoms of pelvic organ prolapse. None of them will cure pelvic organ prolapse. They're basically temporary band-aids to help manage the symptoms of prolapse. If you want a permanent repair, you have to jump to surgery. And I broke that down into 4 categories here. There's native tissue repair, which is actually stitching back your own tissues to provide support to your organs. The downside of that is research indicates that in 1/3 of women, those repairs will fail and have to be rebooted. And the time frame varies considerably from woman to woman, depending on what other conditions you have with your body and what your activities are. Transvaginal mesh got a lot of bad press in the 2011 to 2013 space. I am a transvaginal mesh success story. I am a strong believer in transvaginal mesh. It's polypropylene mesh, and it provides a long-term repair. It's imperative that you do your homework on who is providing that repair for you. And back in the days when there were a lot of complications, there were gynecologists providing procedures they weren't efficiently educated to provide. So see a urogynecologist if you want to have a polypropylene mesh repair. Biologics is a mesh, but it is a type of pig tissue or cow tissue. Sometimes it's embedded with other ingredients to make it stronger and last longer. Colpoclysis is they are literally sewing your vagina shut. Now on the surface, women are creeped out by that, but realistically, if you're not engaging in sexual intercourse and you recognize that intercourse isn't the only way to be intimate, and you're okay with that, and your partner's okay with that, it's a very, very low risk, very, very high success rate surgical procedure that women should explore if they're at that point in their life. Physicians won't provide that, surgeons won't provide that for younger women. You typically have to be at least in your mid-60s before they will consider providing a colpoclysis procedure for you. Discovery upon diagnosis is the norm for most women who experience POP. That's ridiculous. All women deserve to know about POP ahead of the curve, not after the fact. And APOPS is doing everything we can to lift that veil and encourage more open dialogue and to eradicate the stigma that wraps itself around vaginal health in general and pelvic organ prolapse specifically. So what we do is we provide these different tools for women to support them, to educate them, and our goal is our patient support forum. But before we get to that, what we share daily in social media, and that's we've got a closed Facebook space for patient support, we've got an open Facebook page, we have got a Twitter account, we have got a small Instagram account. I haven't been doing a whole lot with that because I struggle with how that format is different. We have got a LinkedIn page for those that are in the white coat, the white collar sector. And what we share is I share tidbits about observations I have, experiences I've had, research documents that I've reviewed, and books about prolapse on both the medical side and the books that I've written. And podcasts, videos, just all little blips of pelvic organ prolapse information. We have got a POP risk factor questionnaire, which is available in 17 languages as a free download PDF on APOP's website. And what you can do with this is you can print this off, you can answer those 18 questions, take that to your gynecologist or your primary care practitioner and ask them to screen you for pelvic organ prolapse if you suspect you have it, which opens that conversation. Because POP screening is not a standardized part of a pelvic examination. So that conversation has to be initiated somehow, some way, and this is a great way to get that conversation started. Now back to that support forum, it's available 24/7. We have women, right now there's over 21,000 women in that space in 177 countries. And these are women that are mid-teens through end of life in all different phases of all different types of POP, quality of life impact. So women come in there, we screen aggressively, we only let women in there. Men have to be a urogynecologist, a gynecologist, or a urologist to get in. And we do screen aggressively to maintain the security of our space. Women come in there and they post their questions and they talk with each other and they share information. It's priceless gold. This isn't APOPs helping women. This is women helping women, sharing their information. We also are building practitioner tools to educate patients more effectively. And what you see on the left upper side of this slide here is a poster that we built, a laminated wall poster, which should be on the walls of every practitioner who provides pelvic examinations. It's a good POP basics poster. It's not cluttered with a lot of medical terminology. There's a list of symptoms that are most common on the left side of that poster, and then on the right side, it's pictures of each of the 5 types of prolapse with that image of a normal pelvic cavity up above that. So women can literally see this and get a visual on what's happening with their bodies. We don't have to do it all alone. We were never meant to. I love this quote by Brene Brown. It says it all. Women right now are not talking out loud effectively about pelvic organ prolapse. I do all day, every day. It's imperative we get to that page, just as we did with breast health, where we're comfortable talking about our vaginas. It's a body part. We should have no shame or embarrassment or stigma attached to it. Get comfortable with the word vagina. Say it out loud. Tell your family members that you've got pelvic organ prolapse. Tell your friends. Tell your work constituents. Talk about it comfortably, and women will tend to react comfortably in kind. People that you know will react comfortably in kind. It's going to take a bit of time to tear down that wall of stigma, but it's imperative that we do so. It's very easy to dismiss the whispers of one woman. However, recognize what APOPS is a movement, a global movement to eradicate the stigma, to increase awareness of this condition, to lift women's health up to where it deserves to be in the 21st century. It is time. I refer to the women that talk openly and comfortably about this as pop stars. They truly are pop stars. These are empowered women, empowering women. And I adore every one of you that does this, who talks about her prolapse openly on her Facebook page or her Twitter page, and talks openly with friends and family and is getting the word out there about this condition. It takes a tribe, and we're all marching side by side, and there's no better time to do this during June POP Awareness Month. I encourage you all to get in the game. I'd like to wrap this up by just sharing with you this thought. When vaginal and intimate health are given the same respect as women's heart, hormone, and breast health, women will finally capture health equity. We have a ways to go, but with your courage and your stamina, we are advancing women's health in a big, big way, and I thank all of you that are engaging in the process. I adore you all. Be strong in your journey. Thank you so much.